Hi everyone, welcome back to For Teachers. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you all about differentiation in the primary school classroom. If you are a student teacher or a newly qualified teacher, you may have heard the word differentiation mentioned quite a few times. Today I'm going to talk to you about what differentiation is, what it looks like in the primary school classroom, and ways that you can incorporate effective differentiation within your lessons. So the first thing I need to discuss is, what is differentiation? Differentiation means tailoring your teaching in order to meet the individual needs of a learner. Teachers do this by adapting their content, instructions, assessment, and learning environment to suit their class. I will also share some other effective ways that teachers do this in today's video. Chances are you are already using lots of different forms of differentiation in your primary school classroom without even realising it. Differentiation is not just providing lots of different tasks or challenges for your children to access. Differentiation starts with your learning environment, your questioning, your challenges, your visuals, your seating plan, your behaviour management. Lots of these can be considered to be effective ways of differentiating within your classroom. So you may be doing a very good job of this already without even realising it. Differentiation is all about removing any barriers to learning and allowing children to all access the learning in their own unique way. I'm going to start by talking to you a little bit about how I differentiate in my classroom. Hopefully it will either give you some ideas or help you to realise that you are already providing adequate differentiation within your classroom. The first thing that I do is I make sure my lessons are very, very visual. You need to differentiate your lessons to make sure that children who speak English as a second language or children who find it difficult to process words and language are able to visually see what you're trying to explain in your lesson. That can be as simple as including lots of different photographs within a presentation that you are showing, or just making sure that any words you show have a visual image or a video reference to go with them. Chances are there will be a lot of visual learners in your classroom that will greatly benefit from having that type of inclusion. As for my seating plan, I change this constantly. Every couple of weeks I move my children around. I might have my students sit next to someone who might be considered to be a higher ability student in a certain lesson in order for them to bounce ideas off one another. I might also pair my students up with different abilities or different type of learners so they can share their different ideas together. For lots of the different lessons that I teach in my classroom, I give my students the opportunity to work with a cool, warm, hot, and spicy challenge selection process. This is based on the idea that students are not always stronger in a certain subject. That subject can branch off into lots of different areas too. For example, a child who's really good with calculation and can multiply numbers really quickly is not necessarily very good at understanding 2D and 3D shapes. So I think it would be very unfair to categorise that child and put them in a certain group for maths, given that they might have different abilities and skill sets within that subject. So I try to allow my children the opportunity to select a challenge that suits their particular learning needs. This is something that has to be heavily monitored at the start. Students will either go for the hot challenge because they want to be the smartest in class, or they will choose the cool challenge because they want to do a little bit less work and they think the challenge will be easier for them. I allow my students to travel up and down this system. It's a fluid system. They aren't set on one challenge and they do not have to remain on that challenge until they have completed it. I try to encourage my students to select a challenge that meets their learning needs for that particular day, but then I also allow them the chance to move up if it's too easy for them, or down if they're finding it a little bit tricky. I will normally use these challenge boxes for my maths inquiry. However, I do use it for language inquiry, and in fact I'll use it for all different kinds of subjects depending on the learning that I want the children to access during that lesson. Another way that I ensure I differentiate appropriately for my class is that I am constantly assessing the children. I might not be sat with a tick list, I might not be doing a test to see exactly where their learning is in that lesson, and I'm changing and adapting my teaching throughout that lesson to make sure that all the children in the class are able to achieve. When I'm planning my lessons for my students, I like to make sure that I include lots of open-ended tasks for them to access. An effective way of looking at this is to imagine low floor, high ceiling challenges. An example of using this in a maths lesson might be giving students a set amount of coins and asking them how many different ways they can make a number. Your lower ability students will be able to access this challenge and they're on the same challenge as the rest of the students in the class, which promotes a feeling of inclusion. But the high ceiling element of this challenge is that some students might be able to use harder combinations in order to make bigger numbers. You might also hear a lot of people talking about differentiation by outcome. An example of that might be in your English or your language inquiry lessons, you might give the children a challenge. For example, you want them to write a persuasive letter. All children in the class are able to access this challenge. All children are going to write a form of letter. However, your outcome expectations will be different for each child. Some children you might expect to see examples of rhetorical questions being used. You might want to see a wider range of punctuation being used. And for other students, or perhaps more visual learners, it might be a construction activity where the students have to put together a persuasive letter in the correct order, having been given a visual that shows this. Everyone has the same challenge, everyone is working with persuasive writing, however your expectations are different given that every child in your class is unique. You might also hear a lot of people talking about the word scaffolding when it comes to differentiation. There is nothing wrong with providing a frame for your students to follow, especially the visual learners who might need to see that first. I always think it's a very good idea to show students exactly what you expect the outcome to look like in order to give them a framework to work with. If I was going to be teaching instructional writing with my class, the first lesson I would do would be to scatter lots of different examples of instructions all over the tables. I would provide a minimal amount of teacher input for this activity. I would simply let the children explore. That helps me with my differentiation. That helps me to see which children in the room already have an understanding of this text type and which students have never seen it before or don't know where to begin with it. The students will walk around the room. I'll normally do something where I click or ring the bell and the students will move on to the next table so they've had the chance to look at all the different text types. Then I'll bring them all together and we'll have a discussion about what we could see. That starts to build the success criteria for this particular genre of writing. I can ask the students what they found, then show an example of how it's used effectively in writing. So before I've actually given any teacher input, I've already done a mini assessment. I've done a formative assessment of my students. I've acknowledged how they've responded to this type of text, and I've already picked out the students who I know already know quite a lot about this. I'm going to be raising the ceiling for those students and asking them where they've seen this before and can they give me an example already. And I've also clocked onto the students who've walked around the room and not really understood what's been presented to them. They may need some more scaffolding. They may need someone to sit with them and talk through the examples of instructional writing specifically with them. With regards exactly what your mentor is looking for and where you're going to show examples of differentiation on your lesson plan, make sure you've made a quick note of things like the different challenges that will be given, the types of questioning you will be answering, and any specific target groups of students that you will be working with and supporting based on any formative assessments of their understanding that you have done throughout the week. You only need to make a quick note of these in your planning. As long as you can talk and you can explain exactly where you've put students and what you've done for them and what you've provided for students in order to make sure they can achieve in that lesson, then you should be able to get a tick for differentiation on your lesson plan from your mentor. If you are still worrying about this and you are unsure as to whether or not you are adequately providing differentiation for your class, just take a step back and have a think. Can all the children in the room access it, even if it's at their own unique level? Have you provided scaffolding to help students to access the learning, even if they might have some initial barriers? Are your challenges low floor and high ceiling, making sure that everyone can access a challenge, making students feel as though they're part of the same lesson? However, some students have got a really high open-ended task that they can continue learning from. In the description box of this video, I've provided lots of different links all about differentiation and effective ways that you can help to incorporate it within your classroom. I am still on this learning journey myself. I'm still always trying to improve my own practice and make sure that my lessons are adequately differentiated. So if you have any top tips for me as well, please post them down in the comments box. If you're not subscribed to 4Teachers already, please click the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up on this video to help support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will speak to you again soon.